Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's dive into this because today we are tracing one of the most epic and honestly unexpected stories in the entire history of human engineering. We're looking at how a 19th century firearm, an instrument of war and frontier survival, actually birthed the modern manufacturing systems that we literally rely on for almost everything we use today. So, what does a modern car engine have in common with a 19th century six-shooter? I know, it sounds like the setup to a joke, right? But the answer to this question represents this massive ripple effect in the history of technology. You see, the exact same obsession with precision that allowed early revolvers to function reliably out on the battlefield, well, that is the direct ancestor of the tools, the vehicles, and the everyday appliances you interact with daily. The journey from there to here is absolutely fascinating. Section 1. Myths of the Makers. To really understand how we got here, we first need to correct the historical record. We all tend to love the idea of a lone genius having a sudden light bulb moment, right? You've probably heard that Eli Whitney single-handedly invented interchangeable parts after securing this massive government contract back in 1798 for 10,000 muskets. The myth basically says he just figured it out overnight. But what's really interesting about this comparison is that the reality is much, much messier. The true achievement of interchangeable parts wasn't just a single stroke of genius. Actually, it was the result of roughly a century of incremental, grueling work by French and American gunsmiths, government armories, and honestly, thousands of anonymous, highly skilled workers who were actually out there refining these techniques on the shop floor over decades. Section 2. The revolver's rise. Let's look at the specific catalysts that really pushed this manufacturing revolution into overdrive. Let's see how this all builds, because Samuel Colt's early career was anything but a straight line to success. Back in 1830, while sailing aboard the brig Corvo, a young Colt was allegedly inspired by the ship's wheel, the windlass, to carve this wooden model of a revolving cylinder. By 1836, he secures his first patent for a revolver that advanced the cylinder simply by cocking the hammer, which was a massive time saver in a life-or-death situation. But it definitely wasn't easy. His first factory in Paterson, New Jersey, faced bankruptcy by 1843, mostly due to a pretty complicated design and a really weak market. It wasn't until 1847 when Texas Ranger Captain Samuel Walker basically asked Colt to build a beefed-up revolver for the Mexican War that Colt finally found his redemption. But, he wasn't acting in a vacuum. A fierce industrial rivalry was already brewing. Innovators like Horace Smith and Daniel B. Wesson were already deconstructing mechanical designs to build their own empires, completely shifting the landscape. And Colt? Well, he wasn't just a tinkerer. The guy was a master marketer and a fast-talking showman. At the Great Exhibition in London, he didn't just display his guns on a table. He literally held the audience spellbound by taking a pile of randomly selected machine-made parts and assembling a fully working revolver right there in front of them. To a Victorian audience, this seemed almost magical, like a parlor trick. But it was undeniable proof that mass-produced, perfectly interchangeable parts were finally a reality. It completely revolutionized how the world thought about manufacturing. Section 3. Forging Precision Valley. Executing this massive vision required a highly specialized industrial ecosystem. Welcome to 1850s Hartford, Connecticut. This region, stretching all the way up through Massachusetts and Vermont, became known as Precision Valley. It was the absolute epicenter of the American system of manufacture, heavily emphasizing the machine production of standardized parts. And the synergy here was just incredible, but the competition? It was absolutely fierce. While Colt dominated early on, Horace Smith and Daniel B. Wesson ended up partnering to form the Volcanic Repeating Arms Company, and by 1857, they launched the landmark Model 1 revolver. This was a real game changer. It represented a massive technological shift towards self-contained metallic rimfire cartridges. And that sparked this intense industrial rivalry with the Colt Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company that basically poured absolute fuel on this entire manufacturing boom. Gunmakers and machine tool builders were constantly collaborating and competing, sharing huge innovations like drop hammers, boring machines, and super complex gauges. Right in the heart of all this was Coltsville. Now, this wasn't just a factory, it was a fully integrated industrial community built by Samuel Colt and his wife, Elizabeth. I mean, they built the manufacturing facilities, employee housing, even community buildings like the Church of the Good Shepherd. Colt knew for sure that his advanced machinery needed highly skilled operators, so he essentially created this favored class of armorers. And it's really worth noting that this massive labor pool relied heavily on immigrant and minority workers. Irish immigrants were brought in as highly skilled blacksmiths, and later on, African Americans migrating from the South found vital, steady job opportunities right here on these factory floors. Section 4. The Accuracy Obsession. Let's zoom in from the massive factory scale right down to the microscopic level.
So while Samuel Colt was the charismatic industrialist, the true heroes of absolute interchangeability were men like Francis A. Pratt and Amos Whitney. They fused their minds over workbenches back in 1860. Interestingly, both men actually spent time working in the Colt Armory, which kind of acted as a sort of higher college for the country's absolute finest mechanics, before going out and founding their own company. Unlike Colt and his flashy showmanship, Pratt and Whitney were driven by this steadfast, almost sacred respect for precision. They realized that to make truly identical parts in massive quantities, you needed an accuracy way finer than the human eye could even see.
I really want you to let this number sink in, 50 nanometers. When Pratt and Whitney started out, machinists were talking about tolerances in 30 seconds of an inch. But they began to relentlessly cut down that margin of error, year after year, decade after decade. They evolved their measurement systems to deal with thousandths of an inch, then 10,000ths, and then millionths. Today, the legacy of their company achieves accuracy down to 50 nanometers. By narrowing this margin of error to near zero, they made absolute interchangeability a total reality for the entire manufacturing world. Section 5. Swords to Plowshares. How exactly did this intense technology of war become the technology of peace? So the crucial point is this. The exact same machine that drilled a hole in a rifle barrel literally began drilling the crankshaft of a motor bus. The deep knowledge that Pratt and Whitney and others learned while pumping out guns during the Civil War was seamlessly repurposed. Because they could now manufacture identical parts at just a fraction of previous costs, complex mechanical inventions were suddenly available to the everyday masses. This technology, forged by conflict, was suddenly being used to build sewing machines to ease tired fingers, bicycles, early aircraft, radios, and even vacuum cleaners. The entire mechanical age we live in today was quite literally forged in the armory. Section 6. The Invisible Legacy. Let's look at how the monumental achievements of the 19th century armory are hidden in plain sight today. Today, interchangeable parts are so deeply embedded in our everyday world that the whole concept is almost entirely invisible to us. For modern shooters, it means a Magpul magazine reliably feeds into a Colt pattern lower receiver, no questions asked. It means mil-spec bolt carrier groups swap flawlessly between rifles from totally different brands, and NATO specifications ensure cross-compatibility globally. But even beyond firearms, this is exactly why a replacement part for your car just drops right in without a mechanic having to manually file it down to fit. It's why an M10 bolt you buy in America flawlessly threads into an M10 nut purchased in China. The modern CNC mills and statistical process controls used in factories today are just direct extensions of the gauge systems developed by these early, obsessive gunsmiths. So, we end right where we began, with a question that I want to leave you to think about. How did the literal machinery of war end up building the machinery of everyday peace? It's pretty incredible to realize that from a young man whittling a wooden model on a ship to the bustling, noisy factories of Precision Valley and the fierce rivalries that shaped them, the pursuit of a better weapon inadvertently created the foundation of our entire modern mechanical world. Every single time you snap a part into place, you are feeling the echo of the 19th century armory. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you looking at the everyday objects around you just a little bit differently.